You've been here before. Not in this exact moment, but in this same emotional place where the floor gives way and you're left staring at the pieces of your job, of your relationship, of whatever hope you had that things were finally going to work out this time. You tried, didn't you? You held yourself together, you showed up, you did the work, you said the right things, you stayed quiet when you wanted to scream, you made yourself smaller, more flexible, more acceptable, and still it fell apart. Again. You keep telling yourself this wasn't supposed to happen, not this time. This time you were careful. This time you were prepared. But it happened anyway. And now, as the familiar weight presses on your chest, you find yourself asking that same old question. Why does this keep happening to me? You've asked it before. After the last job, after the last relationship, after the last time you thought, maybe now I can finally breathe. It always starts with the same hope, a fresh beginning, a clean page, and then, somehow, you're right back here, alone with the silence, replaying conversations, rewriting moments, looking for the mistake that started the collapse. But what if the collapse isn't the problem? What if the pattern is the message? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Maybe what you're calling fate is really an invitation. Maybe these repeating stories, these endings, are part of something trying to be seen, heard, understood, because you aren't broken, you're repeating. And repetition is the language of the unconscious. What you avoid facing doesn't disappear, it waits. It learns to whisper, then shout, then pull the strings when you're not looking. But now, you're looking, now you're listening. So take a breath. You're not starting over. You're stepping in. This isn't punishment. This is the beginning of awareness. And from here, everything can change. It's starting to dawn on you. This isn't the first time, different faces, different places, but the same ending, the same feeling, the same unraveling, the same quiet moment where you sit and think, how did I get here again? It didn't seem like a pattern at first. Each story had its own details, its own reasons, its own heartbreak. But now, if you're honest, you can see it. You start strong, you're hopeful, you show up with the best of intentions, you give, you help, you fit in, and then something changes. You pull back, you get restless, you stop replying, or you say something you don't mean. And then, without knowing how it happened, you're out of the job, out of the relationship, out of whatever hope you had been quietly holding on to. And afterward, you're left with the same two feelings, confusion and guilt, as if you watched yourself sabotage something important and couldn't stop it, even if you wanted to. That's the loop. Carl Jung called it a complex, a bundle of emotion, memory, and reaction stored deep in the unconscious. It's not evil. It's not deliberate. It's protective. Somewhere long ago, you learned how to survive. You learned how to predict rejection, how to stay one step ahead of pain, how to leave before you're left. Maybe it came from a parent who loved with conditions, or a friend who turned away when you were most vulnerable, or a moment when you felt ashamed just for needing something. And now, even though the people have changed, your nervous system still carries the map of that old territory. It remembers how to guard, how to retreat, how to expect the worst, even in the middle of something good. You don't do this because you want to fail. You do it because, somewhere deep inside, failure feels safer than being surprised. That's what complexes do. They repeat the emotional truth of the past, even when it no longer fits the present. They're not flaws, they're unfinished stories. And until you bring them to the surface, until you name them, face them, speak to them, They will guide your choices without your consent. So here's the real question. When did you first learn to expect rejection? You don't have to answer it right now, but you do need to start listening, because the past isn't gone. It's just waiting for you to notice it. And noticing is how healing begins. You're used to covering it up. Pain, doubt, insecurity. You've gotten good at hiding them behind the version of you that everyone seems to like. The competent one, the funny one, the calm, collected one who never makes a fuss. And when someone asks if you're okay, you deflect, you make a joke, you say, "I'm fine," because that's what people expect from you, right? Somewhere along the way, you built a version of yourself that could survive, one that could fit in, one that wouldn't get rejected. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. It's not fake, it's adaptive. But when you forget it's a mask, you start to believe it's the whole of who you are. And it's heavy, because the real you, the one who's tired, angry, lonely, lost, has no room to breathe under all that armor. You feel the pressure even if you can't name it. The need to keep smiling, to be strong, to keep it together, even when everything inside you is coming apart. But here's the truth. The face you show the world is not the one sabotaging you. The cracks in your life aren't failures, they're signals. Evidence that the mask is no longer sustainable, that something deeper is asking to be seen. This isn't about removing the mask completely, not yet. It's about noticing it, because the moment you see it is the moment it starts to lose control over you. There's a part of you that you've worked hard to keep buried, not because it's evil, not because it's dangerous, but because somewhere along the way you were taught that it wasn't welcome. It shows up in flashes, moments you regret, words you didn't mean, impulses that scare you, or feelings that don't fit with the version of yourself you try to protect. You push it down. You tell yourself, "That's not me." You move on. But it doesn't disappear. It waits. And when you're tired, stressed, or just off guard, it slips through. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the collection of traits, emotions, and desires you've exiled from your conscious identity. Not because they're wrong, but because they didn't fit. Anger, jealousy, neediness, the parts of you that wanted too much, the parts that were told, "Stop crying, grow up, don't be difficult." And so, you adapted, you wore the mask, you buried the rest. But the shadow doesn't die in the dark, it grows, and when it's ignored for too long, it starts expressing itself in other ways, in sarcasm, in resentment, in sabotaging the very things you say you want. You might say, "I'm not a bad person." Of course you're not, but this isn't about being bad, it's about being whole, because you are not just your best qualities, you are also the parts you've abandoned. And those parts don't stay quiet forever. You've seen it happen. You explode over something small, you ruin a good thing and don't know why. You feel disgusted with yourself and can't explain where it came from. That's your shadow, not an enemy, not a monster. Just the version of you that's been waiting for your attention, and it wants something very simple, to be seen, not acted on blindly, not unleashed, but acknowledged. The moment you say, "Yes, that lives in me too," you take back control. You stop being haunted by your own reflection. You stop mistaking sabotage for fate. The shadow only becomes dangerous when it's denied. But when you turn toward it, when you're brave enough to meet your own darkness, something changes. You realize there's not just one you, there never was. There's the self you show the world and the one you left behind. And the path to healing begins the moment those two finally meet. If today's reflection felt personal, if you recognize parts of yourself in the moments we explored, please know you're not the only one. Many of us are quietly navigating the same shadows, carrying questions we've never dared to ask out loud. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel, you're choosing to walk a path of deeper self-awareness. And if this message reminds you of someone else who may be struggling in silence, sharing it might offer them a moment of clarity they didn't know they needed. Sometimes the courage to face ourselves begins by knowing we don't have to do it alone. You weren't born afraid of your feelings. You didn't come into the world knowing how to hide or which parts of yourself were acceptable. You learned it slowly, silently, by watching, by listening, by feeling what was welcome and what was not. Maybe it started early, the moment you were praised for being quiet, for being obedient, for staying out of the way. You were told you were good when you didn't cry, when you didn't complain, when you smiled, even if something hurt. That's how it begins. A small reward, a subtle cue. And so, you start to choose the parts of you that will survive. You push down the loudness, the anger, the jealousy, the confusion, the sadness. You put those things away because they didn't seem safe, they didn't get you love, they got you silence, they got you withdrawal, they got you that look, the one that made you feel like a burden. And so, you adapted because you're smart, because you're sensitive, because you needed connection, and you were willing to trade pieces of yourself to get it. That's not weakness, that's survival. But here's the thing, those parts didn't vanish, they didn't die, they went underground, and they became your shadow. So when you ask, why do I keep doing this, or why do I sabotage things, or why do I react so strongly to things that don't make sense? This is the answer. Because there are feelings inside you that were never allowed to speak. Because you became so skilled at hiding that you forgot you were hiding at all. Carl Jung spoke often of the core wound, the moment the self begins to split. When the inner child realizes, this part of me isn't safe to show, and so you buried it, and you grew up. And maybe you even built a successful life, but something always felt missing. That missing part. It's the version of you who never got to be fully human, the one who felt too much, the one who wanted too much, the one who still waits in silence. So here's the question. What happened to all the other feelings? The ones you pushed away to be good? Because healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means remembering who you were before you learned who you had to be. You've asked yourself this more than once. Why do I keep ending up with the same kind of person? At first, it didn't seem like a pattern. They had different names, different faces, different stories. But in the end, it always felt the same. You felt small, unheard, overpowered, trapped in something that started out exciting and slowly turned into something you had to escape. You tell yourself they changed, that they became controlling, dismissive, or cold. But now, you're starting to wonder if something else is at work, not just in them, but in you. Jung called it projection. It's what happens when the parts of ourselves we can't fully accept get assigned to someone else. It's unconscious, automatic. It's not manipulation, it's not blame, it's a defense. When you can't see your own strength, you're drawn to people who seem powerful. When you can't acknowledge your own anger, you find yourself in conflict with those who express it freely. And when you feel emotionally unsafe, you gravitate toward intensity, because at least it feels alive. You may think you're choosing them, but often you're choosing a mirror, a reflection of what you've disowned. And at first that reflection feels magnetic. You admire their confidence, their directness. You feel seen, energized, even rescued. But over time, it flips. Their strength begins to feel like control. Their confidence becomes arrogance, their energy begins to suffocate. That's the shadow of projection. What once fascinated you begins to trap you, and still, part of you stays, hoping to change them, hoping to win back something you never fully had. But here's the truth. You're not just reacting to who they are, you're reacting to what they represent, a part of you that's trying to come home. Because every person you're drawn to, especially the ones who unsettle you, is holding a piece of your inner world. Not because they deserve it, not because you asked for pain, but because your psyche is always seeking wholeness. And until you reclaim what you've projected, you will continue to search for it in other people. So when a relationship becomes intense, ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them? What do I envy? What do I fear? What am I trying to fix outside of me that really belongs inside? This is how projection begins to dissolve, with curiosity instead of blame. You don't have to repeat the same story forever, but to change the pattern, you'll need to take back what you've given away and see the mirror for what it truly is, a chance to meet yourself in someone else's reflection. You wake up unsettled. The dream lingers. You were running again, down long, narrow hallways that twisted and bent in impossible directions, and someone was chasing you. Close, too close. You didn't see his face at first, only the shape. The sound of footsteps behind you, matching your own, a breath you swore could have been yours. Then, just before you woke up, you turned, and what you saw was you. A version of you, but darker. Not evil, just different. Older maybe, worn. Watching you with a calm, quiet intensity that felt more familiar than it should have. It didn't feel like a nightmare. Not quite. But it shook you. Why would you be running from yourself? Carl Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious, symbols, images, and metaphors meant to guide us when our waking mind is too distracted or afraid to listen. And when you dream of being chased, it's rarely about the chaser. It's about the running. So ask yourself, what part of you have you been avoiding? What truth have you locked away so tightly that it can only find you in dreams? That figure in your dream, the one wearing your face, wasn't trying to hurt you. He was trying to reach you, to say, stop running, look at me, I am you. That is the shadow, the part of you you've disowned, now showing up in the only space you can't fully control, your sleep. He appears when you're ready to start listening, not to shame you, not to punish you, but to reunite with you, because he carries the things you thought you had to give up to survive. Your rage, your desire, your fear, your voice. He knows where your pain lives, not to reopen the wound, but to remind you it was never healed. And until you face him, he will keep showing up, in dreams, in reactions, in moments where you say, I don't know what came over me. So instead of running, ask him a question. What do you want me to know? Because this isn't the enemy. This is a messenger, a reflection of everything you've buried, and a doorway to everything you've lost. You don't have to fight him. You only have to stop pretending he isn't there. And when you do, when you finally meet his eyes without fear, you'll understand that he was never chasing you at all. He was waiting for you to turn around. The journey inward isn't easy. It's often quiet, slow, and filled with things we were once taught to hide. But if you're still here, still listening, it means you're ready to see more of who you are. If these words gave you language for something you felt but couldn't name, consider subscribing to stay connected. And if you think someone in your life might need this same invitation to pause and reflect, feel free to pass it on. Every small moment of insight we share helps someone else find their way back to themselves. There's a part of you that doesn't want to go any further, a quiet protest rising from the inside, a voice that whispers, "What if I don't like what I find?" Because it's one thing to notice the shadow, to observe your anger, your envy, your selfishness from a safe distance. It's another thing to admit it's yours. You've spent so long trying to be good, trying to be liked, to be accepted. You've built your life around the idea that those darker parts are mistakes, flaws to fix, not truths to face. And now this work you're doing, this looking inward, it's stirring something uncomfortable. You start to resist. You say, "I'm not like that. That's not me. I don't want to become someone I can't recognize." But here's the paradox. The more you reject those parts, the more power they have over you. The more you pretend they don't exist, the more they operate in secret. Carl Jung didn't say, "Become your shadow." He said, "Integrate it. Bring it into awareness, give it a name, allow it to be part of the whole. Because denying it won't make it disappear. It only makes you split in half. You're not becoming someone else. You're meeting the rest of yourself. And yes, it's uncomfortable, it's messy, it's vulnerable, but it's also honest. And honesty is the beginning of freedom. You can't heal what you won't hold. And you can't be whole if you're still pretending only half of you is real. There's a moment you can't ignore anymore. It doesn't come with fanfare, no explosion, no breakdown. Just a quiet, sudden clarity. I think I'm angry. Not irritated. Not annoyed. Not disappointed. Angry. And not at them, whoever they are. Not even at the world. You're angry at what you've had to bury, at how long you've had to hold it together, at all the times you were told to smile, to behave, to let it go. You're angry because something in you has gone unheard for too long, and like anything that's ignored, it found another way to speak, self-sabotage. That moment you didn't send the email, that job you walked away from without saying why, that relationship you chipped at until there was nothing left. It wasn't laziness, it wasn't carelessness, it was protest. Unconscious maybe, but not accidental. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as a container, a place where everything unacceptable is stored. And when the container gets too full, it leaks, not through words, through choices. You didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin things, but a part of you, tired of being nice, tired of being overlooked, decided to make some noise. It doesn't make you cruel, it makes you human, because the part of you that lashes out is often the same part that was never allowed to feel, never allowed to say this hurts, or this isn't fair, or I matter too. And so instead it waited. And when the moment came, it pulled the trigger, not out of hate, but out of exhaustion. That's the truth you're touching now. Not just that you're angry, but that your anger had nowhere else to go. Until now. The shadow becomes dangerous when it's ignored, but when it's seen, really seen, it can become a guide. Your sabotage was never the enemy. It was a signal, a flare in the dark, fired by a version of you that refused to stay silent any longer. Now that you've heard it, what do you want to do with it? You could punish yourself. You could spiral into guilt and shame. But you've done that before. Or you could sit with it. Let the anger speak. Ask it what it needs. Listen without judgment. Because this isn't just a breakthrough, it's a reunion. And you've been waiting for it a long time. You can't kill the shadow. You've tried, you've ignored it, fought it, buried it under kindness, performance, logic, tried to outgrow it with self-improvement, tried to outrun it with distractions, but it's still here, still whispering beneath your thoughts, still pulling strings when you're not watching. Not because it wants to ruin you, because it wants to be part of you. You see, the shadow isn't something you conquer, it's something you include. It holds the parts of you that never had permission to exist. the impulses you were told to silence, the truths that didn't fit the version of you others expected. And integration begins when you stop seeing those parts as threats and start seeing them as signals. You don't have to agree with everything inside you. You just have to stop pretending it's not there. Carl Jung taught that wholeness is not perfection. It's not becoming pure. It's becoming real. That means making space for contradiction, for complexity, for the fact that you can be generous and jealous, strong and afraid, loving and angry, sometimes in the same breath. And once you allow that, something shifts. Instead of being hijacked by emotions, you begin to observe them. You hear the voice of the shadow and say, "I see you, but I'll choose what happens next." This is the heart of integration. Choice instead of reaction. Awareness instead of avoidance. Conversation instead of conflict. You give the shadow a voice. You let it speak. You listen to its anger. You trace the shape of its sadness. You ask, "What have you been carrying that I refuse to feel?" And slowly, the relationship changes. You no longer stand back to back fighting for control. You sit side by side in uneasy alliance, but no longer at war. The shadow no longer chases you, because it doesn't have to. You've stopped running. That doesn't mean it disappears, but it becomes familiar, predictable, manageable. You recognize when it speaks. You know what it wants. You learn when to listen and when to lead. And in that space, you begin to trust yourself again. Because the shadow was never a stranger. It was the part of you that remembered your pain when the rest of you had to forget it. Now you're remembering together, and healing doesn't mean erasing that memory. It means holding it in the light and choosing every day to live forward, whole. So now you've seen the shadow, you've listened to it, you've stopped running, but the question comes quietly, naturally. How do I live with this now? Because integration isn't a one-time event. It's a practice, a relationship, a daily act of meeting yourself with curiosity instead of fear. You don't need to change everything at once, but you do need tools, ways of staying connected to the unconscious without being ruled by it. Carl Jung offered many. Here are a few to begin with. 1. Active imagination. Sit with an image from a dream or memory. Let it speak. Ask it questions. Write out a dialogue between you and the feeling, the symbol, the voice that lingers. Don't censor. Don't edit. Just let it unfold. This is how the unconscious learns that you're listening. 2. Shadow journaling. Each time something triggers you, when you overreact, shut down, lash out, ask, what part of me did that moment expose? Instead of blaming the world, turn inward. Capture the emotions you'd rather avoid. Give them names. Patterns will emerge, and those patterns will become your map. 3. Watching projections. Pay attention to the people who stir something in you. Admiration, resentment, obsession, disgust. What are they showing you about yourself? What have you projected onto them that really belongs to you? The people who challenge you most often carry the traits you've exiled. Seeing this doesn't mean letting them stay in your life, but it does mean asking, what is mine here? What am I being shown? 4. Dream reflection. Your dreams are messages in metaphor. Keep a journal by your bed. Record images, emotions, fragments. Over time, you'll notice recurring symbols. These aren't random. They're personalized guidance from your unconscious. A flooded house, a lost child, a broken mirror. These are not puzzles to solve, but invitations to feel. Sit with them. Ask what they're pointing toward. Sometimes the dream will answer. Sometimes your waking life will. These practices aren't perfect. They won't give you immediate peace, but they give you something better: relationship, not with the world, with yourself. Because the shadow isn't asking you to fix it. It's asking you to hold it, to stop pushing it away, to sit with it in quiet moments, pen in hand, heart a little more open, to say, I see you. I'm still here. Let's keep going. This is how you live with it, not with control, not with shame, but with presence. The more you practice, the less you fear what lives inside you. And slowly, the light returns. Not because the darkness is gone, but because you're no longer hiding from it. You're not lost anymore. You may not know exactly where you're going. You may still feel uncertain, raw, exposed, but you're no longer running. There's a different stillness now. Not the stillness of collapse, but of presence, of someone who has stopped avoiding their reflection and finally begun to look, not with judgment, not with fear, but with something closer to respect. Because now you know, the parts you tried to escape weren't here to destroy you. They were waiting, watching, holding memories your mind couldn't carry, emotions your life didn't know how to hold, and for the first time, you're holding them. You're not pretending to be whole. You're practicing wholeness by including everything that felt too messy, too loud, too complicated to be loved. You once thought the shadow was your enemy. You feared that if you faced it, it would consume you. But what you found is that it's quieter than you imagined, wiser, more patient. It didn't want control, it wanted connection. Carl Jung said the shadow is not evil, it is simply unseen. And now it's seen. That doesn't mean your work is done, it means it's just begun. But from this point forward, you walk with your eyes open, with your mask loosened, with your fear softened by understanding. You've made room for all of you, and if you ever forget, if the old patterns return, if the darkness stirs, you won't panic. You'll remember this is not a fall, it's a return, a call inward, a quiet voice saying, you're still here, keep going. So maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe this quiet, unfamiliar peace is where you truly begin. If this story spoke to a part of you that usually stays quiet, we want you to know it was meant for you. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about finally including the parts that were left out. Subscribing is a way to keep that conversation going, not just with us, but with yourself. And if you know someone who might be on the edge of their own breakthrough, sharing this could be the encouragement they've been waiting for. Because being seen, truly seen, is sometimes the beginning of everything.